My name is Matt Zarator. I work at Spokane County. I'll be the moderator today for your session called STORM, Collective Impact for Stormwater Education, Outreach, and Beyond. The presenter today is Stef Frenzl. He's a communications specialist at Snohomish County. Stef has over 15 years of experience in the fields of social marketing, group facilitation, ecological research, and habitat restoration and protection. He is a core member of the Stormwater Outreach for Regional Municipalities, STORM. I'm sure most of you have heard of it. A consortium of over 80 Puget Sound jurisdictions working to fulfill MPDS permit, education, and outreach requirements, which most of us have. And he also serves on the steering committee for the Puget Sound Starts Here awareness campaign and the nationally recognized Don't Drip and Drive Vehicle Leak campaign. Welcome, Stef.
Thank you, Matt. Welcome, Doug. Thank you very much for being here. Can I get a show of hands for how many people here are involved with education outreach in some way, shape, or form within your permit? Cool. And I want to let you know that the way that I'm going to present this isn't just about education and outreach related work, that I'm going to encourage you to think of outside that particular box if you feel it's appropriate to do so. And I'll also be using an example, which is STORM, for this idea of called collective impact, which is a way of working together in a collaborative nature. And Stormwater Outreach for Regional Municipalities is a coalition of 83 or so jurisdictions around the Puget Sound area that have gotten together and said, let's work together on the education outreach requirements of the NPDES permit. And as a result from that, we've had all sorts of cool things happen. And so that's really what I'm going to talk about today is the what happened and why it happened and how this might be a good lesson for all of us for how we might be able to collaborate a little more effectively as we continue to move forward in the work that we do. So I want to start off and ask the question to you of, have you ever had this experience where you feel like you're just running in circles, you're facing towards your goal, but you're never going to get there? Or at least it feels like you're never going to get there. No matter how fast you move your legs and run around, it just feels like you're just sort of on this treadmill. And then you look around and all of a sudden you see that everybody else is really doing this too. And you don't really know how you're going to get off that. And I think all of us have had this type of experience in some way, shape, or form over the course of our careers. And this is something that we can change, and a lot of us are working to change in a variety of ways. And so I want to get that context to you as we start out, as well as, let's see if this goes. Ooh. This one, right, where we have maybe these two people actually think they're working towards the same goal, but they're unknowingly pushing against each other. And a little frustrated by that lack of movement as things continue to not move forward there. So really the idea that I'm going to talk about is how do we minimize these experiences from happening, and how do we work together in the same way to be able to move forward and be as effective as we can be. Okay, so I'm going to talk about STORM. This is our brand new logo. Yay! And so like I said, we're this organization that's working together to fulfill our NPDES permit requirements. And I'm going to use this as a case study example for the rest of my talk. And I'm going to give you a little bit of history about STORM and how we kind of came to be. In 1995 was the very first permit that was given out, and that was really given out to 5 jurisdictions throughout the region that we all know now is called Phase 1 permittees, and Snohomish County was one of them. And at that point in time, the permit requirements for education outreach were relatively minimal. And so we didn't see too much happening in a collaborative nature regarding education outreach. There was already something in place down in the South Puget Sound region, and maybe a few counties or cities would work together on certain things, but there wasn't a very strategic, thoughtful approach, especially throughout the region. In 2006 is when STORM, through King County, received their first grant. It was a $1 million grant to start a collaborative effort. And that was the grant that started the Puget Sound Starts Here campaign that specifically was designed to be able to support the NPDES permittees, as well as the EcoNets, which is a coalition of nonprofits and educational institutions and others that come together to support similar types of efforts, and we worked to design a campaign that would allow or enable those organizations to all come together under one banner, under one message, and try to make a difference collectively throughout the region of the Puget Sound area by only promoting certain messages in a certain way, and understanding that if we're able to do that, we're going to be more effective. And we did that all because in 2007 we knew this new permit was going to be coming out that was going to have more influence over the work that we as jurisdictions were doing. And so we were sort of jumping the gun, and thank God for ecology, which there's some people from ecology here, so thank you, to be able to get that going. 2009 is when we actually launched it, so it took 2 years for us to get the grant, to do all the research, to figure out what we want to do before we actually launch the thing. And the reason why it took 2 years was not because of boring bureaucracy. It was because there's actually a lot of work that goes on to be able to run a big campaign and get something set up in a strategic fashion. And we happen to have an amazing team of people throughout the area from different jurisdictions with different expertises working together, creating a new collective genius that had never been created before to create this campaign. And as a result from that, we were able to create something that was very effective in the very first phase of the campaign. 2 years later, we got more funding from ecology to be able to continue that campaign and support the work. So I'm going to be talking and showing some outcomes of that in a moment. And so latest was in 2012, the Puget Sound Partnership contributed funding as well to continue this campaign. And so that's where we are right now, is that funding is actually starting to phase down a little bit, and we're looking at continuing to move forward with hopefully more money in the near future. But I want to show you a few things that the Storm Coalition and EcoNets have come up with, have created as a result of this Puget Sound Starts Here campaign. So what you can see here is there's a lot of blue colors and orange color in there, and so that's a part of our overall brand that we have. So that way, no matter where you are in the Puget Sound region, if you see those colors, you're going to connect that. So if you're in Bremerton, or if you're in Bellingham, or anywhere in between, you'll be able to see, oh, this is a common message. And so that way you're not competing, and you're reinforcing each other with this message over time. So you can see everything from people with signs and posters, and there's a dog do-goody video that was about pet waste, path tags for people to do geocaching, there's coasters on natural yard care, there's fish and signs that we had at Mariners game, there's these placards that you put right on the storm drains that say Puget Sound Starts Here, a dog that's dressed up that's wearing stuff about pet waste at ball games. There's the Drain Ranger program that's integrated. There's all sorts of different things, as you can see here, that happen that these jurisdictions created. It just goes on. And we had 83 plus people that were working on this. But the thing that's important to know about this is that none of us in this particular way are so bogged down in the communication of how do we do this. We created an infrastructure or a foundation for us to work from and said, this is open source. So anybody can use it. Here's the way to use it, but let's not require so much overhead and so much oversight that it bogs everybody down and nobody wants to use it. And so we let it up the creativity of the jurisdictions to do what they thought would work for them using some general guidelines. And as a result from that, we came up with all sorts of things, from basic awareness, like you can see this Great Peninsula one there, which is a really nice fact sheet, to campaigns like the Don't Drip and Drive Vehicle Leak campaign, and everywhere in between where we have different people working on different things, but using that brand color and linking other campaigns like Don't Drip and Drive and Natural Yard Care and other things underneath this big banner of Puget Sound Starts Here, so that way people are always getting the reinforced message of, oh, when it rains, it hits the ground, and that collects pollutants, and then that ends up in the Puget Sound and having an impact on fish and wildlife and us. So this really happened not because of some top-down. It was really a bottom-up effort. And there's more. Okay. And so one of the things, though, as we're looking at this, we're kind of wondering, well, why is this happening? What's going on here? Is it just dumb luck, or is there more to it? And for us, it was a little bit of both. We had some really smart people who were working on things, but it wasn't like we were strategically saying we need X, we need Y, we need Z, and if we do that, we're going to be able to achieve our goals. And so over time, though, we came to understand that a little bit more about what we were doing, and that what we were doing actually fits in a particular model. And that's a model called collective impact. And so what I'm going to be talking about today is more about the fundamental components of what collective impact is, and how Storm, whether knowingly or unknowingly, it was a little bit of both, was meeting and fitting in with that model in a successful way. And that's a big reason for why Storm has been as successful as it has been. So what I'm going to do here is play a short little 1.5, 2-minute video to give you an introduction. And hopefully the sound doesn't put you to sleep. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about each of those components that you saw in that video. And using Storm as a way to be able to start that. Okay, so really that first one was the common agenda. And this is really an important component for Storm as we launched. When Doug Rice from King County started out with his $1 million grant that he was working on, he invited almost everybody under the sun to come in this big meeting, and it was everybody from jurisdictions and nonprofits and education institutions, and he came together and said, we need to work together, and he had a really big drum, and he was beating it, and everybody got really excited. And then they realized, we better not do it this way, because if we all come together in one way like this, maybe it's too complicated, because they have all these different jurisdictions and all these different nonprofits that each have their own agenda. They have their own thing that's happening here. And so the people who were working with Doug gave him the advice, and they collectively said, why don't we scale this back for the moment, and let's only focus on permittees. So the organizations like the phase 1s and phase 2s that are specifically working on very specific things, let's focus it only on stormwater. And let's make sure that we are really driven by the permit. So everything that we as a group come together on, let's only focus on this permit and making sure that we're going to be in compliance with it. And let's let that be our agenda. Let's let that be our driver as we move forward. Let's not focus on salmon. Let's not focus on anywhere other than the Puget Sound region, because geographically we need to really keep ourselves in a way where we can communicate. We can focus in a way. So we didn't want to go to statewide in this effort at that point in time. And we also said, why don't we focus on just 3 of the best management practices that are identified in the permit to start out. Let's not focus on everything and really overload ourselves. And then the last thing is, why don't we create this regional message, and let's try to create a campaign. And over time, through their work, the 2 years of that process, they created the Puget Sound Starts Here brand from which that campaign would stand. And the way that they looked at those best management practices, they said, well, we've got like 100 different best management practices out there. What should we do? Which ones should we choose? So they went through what I'm calling here is a SMART criteria process. So using the same idea as SMART goals, which probably most of you have heard from, we had something very similar to that. And we ended up coming up with 3 primary areas. One was the lawn and garden, one is vehicles, and one was pets. And so we start off with focusing on fertilize sparingly, use commercial car wash and pick up your dog waste, and using that as a starting point. And the way that we kind of looked at this through those SMART goals or SMART criteria was looking at, is that best management practice specific enough for somebody to actually say, I know what to do? And when and where and why and how, and is it just one versus multiple? There is another element of the measurable is, can we quantify this? In order for us to be successful, there's a lot of people, rightfully so, that say, education outreach is pretty fluffy. And how do we know your work is really worth anything, right? We're just throwing money away if we do this. So we need to come up with a way that helps us really show and prove that the work we do has an on-the-ground impact. And so we wanted BMPs that would enable us to show that to those people who like to fund the work that we do. From an achievable standpoint, is it something that we can do? Some programs maybe not be as achievable. Initially, Don't Drip and Drive, the vehicle leak side of things, we thought that wasn't achievable, so we didn't choose that originally because it seemed too big of a behemoth to try to take on. And so we chose those three that helped us say, okay, these we think are achievable both for us and for the people that we're asking them to do this behavior. Is it relevant? Is it going to work for everybody in the Puget Sound region? If we're using this as a regional campaign and we're saying everybody in the region should be doing these things, let's make sure that people in the urban areas and the rural areas both say, yeah, this makes sense to me. And will it fit within the grants? Will it fit within our timelines? Will it fit within the rest of all that from that time perspective? And so when we look at that whole thing from the common agenda, looking back at what we were doing, we really were on a very clear common agenda. And so we can say, yes, okay, that makes sense. That's one of the reasons why Storm has had some success. But it's not the only one. There's 4 others, right? And so the next one was shared measurement. And that's much more specific in that area of how do we collect data and use that to be able to help us understand how effective we're doing and how effective we're not doing, and then how we can change that and improve upon that over time. But if we can all share this common set of data and agree on what are we going to measure, then we're going to be more effective collectively. And so this is what that diagram showed, where you've got an individual, you're measuring groups, maybe you're measuring the oars and the tools that you're using. So we've collectively agreed on a lot of those things related to our campaign. So from a sound-wide area, from a regional perspective, we're looking both awareness and we're looking at behavior change. So awareness is, are people aware that there is a problem with Puget Sound? Are people aware that how the Puget Sound gets sick is in part because of when it rains, it collects pollution, ends up in the Puget Sound? So that was the awareness side. The behavior change side is, are people actually changing their behaviors? Which is very, very different than just are they aware, because there's a whole set of different components to what you have to do in order to help encourage somebody to change their behavior, especially for some of the things that we're asking them to change their behavior with. And so there's a regional element to this and a local element to this. On the regional side, we have grants that allow for us to really monitor in an effective way. A lot of our grants, we have over $50,000 to $60,000 that help us do this measuring, because it is not cheap. It does cost money to do. There's the Environmental Behavior Index, which King County and several other partners lead up, where every few years they actually test people in the King County region of the same questions about their environmental behaviors. And so we're using that as one way of measuring how well are we doing in the campaign. We also have the Puget Sound Partnership, which is doing something similar at the regional scale all the way across the Puget Sound. So we're using those at a regional scale to help us better understand both awareness and behavior change on very specific things. At the local level, we have much more related to the project areas. So for example, for natural yard care, right now there's a grant where 17 jurisdictions are working together to implement a natural yard care program, and we have very specific things that we're doing for measuring that. We actually have a $180,000 evaluation component of that particular project. There's a Don't Drip and Drive grant, same thing on that one. It's not $180,000, I wish it was, but it's actually about $50,000 for that one, for us to be able to measure our effectiveness there. So we are really being thoughtful about how we're measuring and how we're showing that our work is making a difference on the ground, and by default, or unfortunately we're not able to specifically say here's the benefit to water quality at this point in time. So what we're measuring is, are people changing their behaviors? It'll take more time in order for us to see that benefit to water quality because of the nature of the number of people that we're working with. But we do have a vision for definitely getting there. Okay, so shared management, check. That was a really big thing. But then there's this next one, which may be the most important one here, which is making sure that everybody is reinforcing each other, that we're able to really make sure that we're all in alignment, that we have an agreed strategy for how we're going to go about things, and that we aren't bumping into each other. We don't have one person on one side of the rock and another person on the other side of the rock, and you're pushing against each other. So the stern pair, for example, from this video, they set the stroke rate and the rhythm. That's a different type of activity than the powerhouse, which is a little less technical, but they're the power. And then you've got the bow pair, which is the most technical. They set the balance piece. So you have different pieces that are playing different parts, but they're supporting each other like a puzzle. And so this is another way of describing this. So on the top end is what we can see and what I know all of us have worked on in some capacity, where we kind of think we're all going to the same target, but there isn't that much strategy going on there. And there's this gap of actually being able to achieve your target because you don't have a thoughtful strategy in place that really gets you to your target. So you end up missing. At least at the big picture. You might have some really good things that come out of it, but at the end of the day, maybe you aren't as effective as you could be, versus this lower one where if you can all reinforce each other, you are very likely to have a bullseye. And so looking at Storm and how we were structured in our strategy, first, Storm as a whole has a strategic plan that we work from. It's a 5-year plan, and every year we develop work plans to saying, what are we going to do this year that's going to help us get to fulfilling that strategic plan? We have a core team of people that I'll talk a little bit more about, but basically it's a number of the phase 1 and phase 2 jurisdictions, and for those of you who have people who are a part of that, thank you very much. This is everything from, let's see if I can remember them all. Okay, Kitsap, because I know that she's there. We have King, Snohomish, Pierce County. We have Redmond has participated, Kirkland. I'm going to get in trouble here if I'm sorry. Bothell and maybe one or two others that over the course of time have participated in it. And this is a group of people that are basically meeting once every other week for a 2 to 3 hour meeting to really think about how we continuing to move over the course of time. And we're a tight-knit group. We have a lot of fun together, and we also get a lot of great work done. And we aren't just insulated. We work with everybody else, and we're very thoughtful about our particular role. We also have ad hoc committees where, depending on a particular topic, like natural yard care, we come together and for those people who feel like they want to participate in that. We also have geographic areas where we have stormwater outreach groups with, I think there's 7 of them throughout the Puget Sound area. So within all the jurisdictions from Snohomish County, come together once a quarter and meet then. We have a open architecture, which I described before, where we created this platform which you can use the Puget Sound Starts Here brand for any of your materials. And we aren't going to try to box you in and limit you in a way that's going to make it so creativity gets stifled. And then finally, find the natural partners. We have an open sense where you aren't forced to participate, and you're certainly welcome to participate if you want to. And we try to figure out how do we make that as easy as possible for people to do. And so because of this structure and leadership, that has been a really critical role. But it's also the powerhouse, I would say, are the people from the jurisdictions and the econets that are working together to be able to make this campaign happen. If it isn't for that, then this really doesn't happen at all. And the last thing that's really important one is we do not have any contracts between the storm jurisdictions that try to move money around, because that would just stop everything. Because of the bureaucracy that's involved with that, as you all are smiling. So you get it. So we're all able to do this out of the kindness of our own hearts and because we're required to with the NPDES permit. And we're not forced to try to share money. And as a result from that, that has been so critical for making sure we're successful. I know there are other campaigns throughout the United States that have tried to do this and have tried to share money, and that's been what bogged them down. So from an education outreach perspective, the strategy that we all have agreed to from a big picture level is what you're looking at here, which is what we call the public involvement continuum. And in general, how we look at this is from the bottom up. And so we have this regional awareness piece. And the reason why that's bigger is because that implies that there's more people that we're trying to reach at that level compared to the higher up you get at the pyramid. And so at the bottom part of the pyramid, we're really focusing on basic regional awareness. And as you get higher up, it's a little bit more complicated, more detailed, more energy and more effort goes into focusing and finding those people that will change their behaviors over time. So at the bottom level of this pyramid, really we can get away and be supported by regional campaigns with regional advertising, like bus ads throughout the region, or radio ads, or TV, things like that. But you're not going to change anybody's behavior by those kinds of things alone. You need the local on-the-ground implementation by the cities to also participate for the citizens in their jurisdiction to be successful, and that's what the upper portion of this pyramid is. And so all of us come together with an understanding and agreement to this. Now this actual model is much more complicated than this, but from the big picture perspective, this is what I'm going to show you. And we all have an understanding of how this works and our role in this. And it changes depending on the project we're working on and the things that we're doing. But we're always thinking about this model when we work together. So mutually reinforcing activities is something that Storm has been very effective at. So the next one is continuous communication. And this one I don't think I need to describe. It's pretty common sense. We need to communicate constantly. In the case of the video, it was the coxswain that was doing this work, and you can hear the listening part, you can see that from this image where the people are listening to that. But of course, in our world, it's always more complicated than just that, right? You have people from different perspectives, different things that need to be communicated. It's a big network, it's a big web, and it can be big, one of those big, hairy goal type things that we're trying to accomplish. And so the way Storm has figured out how to work on this is through a variety of different means. One is through quarterly meetings where we all get together. So initially we have the Storm core team, which meets every other week, but working with all of the Storm members, the 83 jurisdictions, we have meetings once a quarter that we move from South Sound, Central Sound, and North Sound to make sure that people have a chance to not feel like they're always taking the long drive, to be able to meet and coordinate and work together. We have those local groups, what we call Stormwater Outreach Groups, or SOGs, which is in their local area where they meet more focused and direct on their particular individual outreach program areas. We have permit coordinators that we reach out to and make sure that the permit coordinators know what Storm is doing. We have EcoNet, which is those nonprofit organizations and educational organizations that come together, and we meet with them as well. And so we do our best to make sure there's this great network and weaving of communication across all of these groups. There's also monthly emails. Some of you, if you're on our email list, is probably more than monthly recently. So when there's a need, but we try not to overdo it because then people stop reading them, right? So it's finding a balance there. There's professional development opportunities, like we had a symposium 2 days ago, which we do once a year. And then we have this web portal where most of the things that you would want to know from Storm and our activities is online. So you can go onto this website and learn about what it is that we're doing. And as you can imagine, this takes a lot of work, a lot of time, a lot of dedication. And so it's not something that we can just say, oh, it just happened, poof. And so that's something that is very important to continue to think about in terms of how we can be effective. So fortunately, we've been very effective in that realm. We can always improve, but we at least have a good foundation from which we can work upon there. And the last one here is backbone support. And this is really an important component. Some people say it requires a whole separate organization to do this. I wouldn't consider Storm and our core team a whole separate organization, but it does require a focus group from individuals who know this is their job, is to serve this particular role. And this is that core team's role, which they meet every other week to really think about the everyday in and outs of how they work. And so and what we're going to do and how we're going to focus, and then working to make sure that whatever it is that the overall network is doing is in alignment with what the jurisdictions really think is a good idea to do. And so in the video they talk about the boat, and honestly I actually disagree with that a little bit, because what I think it is, it's the people behind the scenes who make that rowboat or the actual rowing happen. This is the coordinator who schedules the events. This is the coach. It's the evaluator to see how well they're doing. It's the person who maintains the rowboat. What are these things called? Shell. Thank you. I'm obviously not a good example for this. This is the financier, and it's the accountant, right? So these are the people that really make this happen behind the scenes, and this is what that backbone support really is. And so in Storm, talked a little bit about the core team, And in the Puget Sound starts here, there's a slightly different core team which involves those people on Storm Core. It also involves people with the Puget Sound Partnership. It involves people with the Department of Ecology and with the EcoNets and the EPA. And so making sure that all the major stakeholders who are providing funding or some other source an opportunity to really make sure they're a part of the backbone. Now, talking about backbone, something to consider that my coworker Susie really gets excited about is something called personality temperaments and roles. So when you're developing or when you have a backbone structure, who is a part of that backbone structure is very important to consider. And personality temperament is one way to look at that. So what I'm going to talk about here, so the Keirsey, if you go on to Keirsey.com, this is, if you guys have done the Myers-Briggs tests, that kind of thing, that's what I'm talking about here. And so there's different personality types for each of us, and it actually depends on your lifestyle or in your life. So maybe you're a different personality at home than you are at work. You know, so whatever your personality might be at work is the kind of personality that we're talking about here for how you might be a good fit within the overall effort that's a collaborative effort. The top ones, idealists and rationals, are the ones that we believe are kind of critical for playing that steering committee or that backbone role. And the reason why is because they're always looking at what's possible for our organization. What could we be doing? They're the visionaries out there. And you need both the personal ones, the people who understand that personal relationships is vital for keeping these networks alive. Because when people get mad at each other, the whole thing breaks down, right? So you need people who can deal with that. And you need the rationals, the logical people who say, we need to measure and we need to make sure that we have everything on task or else we're going to fall apart that way. And so the people at the top part of this circle, you really want to make sure you have good support of those types of personalities on your backbone structure. On the lower end ones, this is where you have a lot of the people who are very effective at the doing. They're really excellent at seeing what's necessary from a moment to moment to be able to get things done on the ground. And so they're excellent at making sure that the visionaries aren't so off in the clouds that nothing is really practical. Okay? So it's really good to have them as well. So we really need all these personality types to be able to come together in a campaign. And I don't mean to imply that you only want idealists or rationalists in your backbone. But what it is good to know is that a lot of these people think very differently. And so you need a team. The ideal team is all of these, but a team that can still work together and that doesn't do this all the time, because that can happen in these types of situations. So finding that right balance is something that's very helpful and important. So, you know, we all like to see what our personality is, so there's a good opportunity to figure that out. And so this is, I believe you'll have these slides on the website, so this is where you can go to be able to learn more. This is a free test you can do. Personally, I love this stuff, so I think it's really fun. So hopefully you do too. Okay, so we've got that backbone support piece taken care of pretty well. So the thing about collective impact, though, you know, Storm, we kind of somewhat intentionally, somewhat unintentionally came across this and figured out, hey, this is what we are and this is why we're successful. And some of it was intention, some of it was luck. And really the point that I'm trying to make is, though, here is the more intention we put into these 5 pieces, the more likely we are to be successful. Okay? And so this is a really good framework to work on for us to say, you know, maybe we're not as good at the shared measurement as we should be. So how do we focus on that and make sure we beef that up? Maybe we're not as good at this communication as we should be, so let's beef that up. So this gives us that framework. But the other side of this that's maybe not as good is that the more intention and the more effort, right, or more intention, you're going to have more effort, more commitment, more money, more time focused on building those things, which may or may not be the right thing to do. And so that's up to you as an organization or as a backbone or as a campaign to think about, for this particular situation, does it make sense? So let's keep our thinking caps on. Don't drink the Kool-Aid. So take-home message here is that really a collective impact can make a big difference, but not necessarily. In order to make it work, it requires that you have these sufficient things. It requires you have sufficient drivers. You have enough capacity within your staff to do these meetings and to plan and do those things, in addition to the actual implementation, because that's a whole different job that they have to do. You have to make sure that there's the right expertise at the table for different aspects of those roles. You have to make sure you've got the money and the space and everything else to make that happen. You have political support and financial support and the time, depending on what you're trying to achieve to do this. And so if all those things that line up, like the way it did in Storm, it can be magic. It can work wonders. But it really, I don't want to necessarily to say, do what we did because it's amazing. Let's really think about this and make sure that we're being as effective and thoughtful as we can be. So I want to get back to this, these two slides or images here and help you, maybe encourage you to think about which of the projects you've been working on, whether or not it's education or outreach. Okay? It could be something that's totally unrelated. This collective impact model can work for most things. Like I said, can work for most things. And where might you think, at a minimum, those 5 elements might fit in and be effective in helping to support your work a little bit more effectively there. So I'm going to talk about 2 of these, or at least encourage you to think about these 2 here that are in red a little bit more. So the first one, where can we be mutually reinforcing a little bit more effectively? So whatever program you have, think about that. I'm going to give an example. One of the things that we've been trying to do in Storm since inception is trying to create a resource library where everybody comes together, and instead of everybody recreating the wheel and running and spinning your own wheels doing the same thing, why don't we share resources as effectively as we can? And we did try to do this. Unfortunately, the software platform we had was not useful. And so we're hoping to continue that effort. So I know there's an ecology person here, and maybe there's an EPA person here that we can continue to work and see, is there a way we can find funding to support this kind of work? Because this is something that statewide could be useful. It wouldn't just be for Puget Sound necessarily that could support this. But what this does is, let's say there's really great information on natural yard care, and if you're a small jurisdiction in Eastern Washington, well, if you have access to all those materials and then can change and update those materials for your jurisdiction, you just saved yourself, potentially $150,000 of development costs, right? So those are really great value there. Another idea for Eastern Washington would be, for now, maybe it doesn't make sense, given where your permit is and the effort that's required by the permit to implement the permit from the education outreach standpoint. Maybe it doesn't make sense for all of you to drive together twice a week from all aspects of the state to create a campaign similar to Puget Sound Starts Here, because it does take a lot of that coordination effort. But it certainly might make sense for you to coordinate at your local region with your neighbors in a much more thoughtful, strategic way, using this backbone structure, using the whole collective impact structure. And then the other question I have is just, how can you improve your communications? There's all sorts of tools out there now that can support us and help us. Some of these are more challenging for jurisdictions to use than others. And so that's something that we're really looking at figuring out is how do we support each other? But this is where Storm can help support other jurisdictions that don't have the benefit of Storm right now to come up with ideas for what might work if you're in Eastern Washington, for example. And that's basically where I wanted to end.